Okay, so welcome back. Let's do a quick review of some of the shifts that we are looking at. Nope, not that. Okay. Wait. If I show you the slide, then you'll remember it, obviously. But okay, so shifts. Some of the shifts that are really important right now and that are making a game-changing difference. We talked first about moving from kind of an era of being avoidant or, so strong we didn't need to deal with this, to doing what? Grieving well. There we go. From a movement from hubris to humility. Yeah. A movement from muscular optimism to right. And by the way, this is not condemnation about anybody in the age of institutions. I mean, this was good leadership. It was the right thing to do. I mean, it was appropriate for the era. What we're trying to do is just clarify that there really are some differences going on, and engaging these mindsets and practices over and over and over again in the experience I've seen and witnessed and been a part of is making a huge difference. Okay, so we moved from demand to, nice. This isn't a great word, but I didn't know what else to call it. From a singular organizational focus to multimodal. Okay, so maybe the word is my problem. You all have it down. Got it. And now we'll do the last one. And it starts with a story, and then we'll explain it. This is a picture of the sanctuary of Ormwood Park Presbyterian Church, which in 2016 celebrated 106 years of ministry and closed its doors. The Presbytery of Greater Atlanta came to my team and said, "Would you like to start a new church here, or would you like us to sell the building?" I said, "I don't know." Because there's a reason that church closed. There wasn't much demand for it, clearly. But I didn't know, because I don't know anything about the Ormwood area. So I asked the presbytery for a few months to do discernment work. And they said yes, despite developers making generous bids on the property, and despite the presbytery's committee being a group of volunteers who have no interest in maintaining and operating an empty building, which will need the grass cut and, the bills paid, etc. But they said yes. So shout out to people who make decisions like that, who are open and who will allow for some exploration. So they did not want to be in the business of sustained business property management, but they said, sure, take a few months. We appointed a team, consulted demographic data, because it does tell a story. Not the story, but it tells you some things. And then we spent time in the community doing prayer walks and walking around and driving around and talking to neighbors and parents on the playground and business owners. And being trained in community organizing, I conducted one-to-one relational meetings, which are meetings that you have with titled or untitled leaders of the area, not so that you can just make a new friend or get to know people, but for the purpose of listening and hearing what is on the minds of the people who are really investing in a particular geographic region. So I went in knowing no one. I did not know how to, and you don't just go up on the street and say, "Hi, can we talk?" That never works. But I knew no one. I had to really reach far and wide in my network to find somebody who knew somebody who would send me an email and see if they would have a 30-minute coffee with me. And I finally found someone who set that up, and I met with one person. And at the end of it, after 30 minutes, because you've got to limit it to 30 minutes, otherwise people start to not trust you. And so after that 30 minutes, I said, thank you for this time, really appreciate it. I had been asking, what do you do here in this community? Why? What do you love about this place? What are the challenges here? Just to kind of get to know what's on his mind and to also learn about the community. Because in the back of my mind, the question is, and this is a posture from the emerging era, it's all curiosity. The question is, what is God doing here? And are we called to be a part of it? But of course, that's not a question you straight up ask. And so I met with that leader at the end. I said, hey, do you know anybody else who would, who I could meet with? And he set me up with 2 other people. And then it just kind of flowered and bloomed from there. Now, this isn't a conversation about whether we should start a new church. It's not a conversation about my agenda. The idea is to listen, look, and see, and just discern. And so, these one-to-one conversations, there are 2 ways, really, of being in the world. One is task-oriented. It's concerned with how much you're going to get done with a certain amount of effort and time and energy. And then the other is far more concerned with the relationships in the room. It's concerned with who is there, who is not here. It's concerned with who is part of the effort and how will we be together. And so I adopted a relational approach by having relational meetings. Honestly, this was just accidental. This was not in the books about how you do this. This was only because I had been trained in community organizing at another church. And so I thought getting to know people through one-to-one relational meetings was a good idea. And so, bottom line is, I conducted these with as many people as we could. And the question was never, should we start a church? It was all these kinds of things. And this is the background questions, but for them, it was, tell me about yourself. Why do you do what you do? And by leaders, when I said who you meet with, sure, pick the people who have titles, like the principal of the school or the business owner or the, preschool teacher or whoever. But you also need to find those leaders who do not have titles. You know who I'm talking about, right? Like the lady who sits on the front porch and knows everything that's happening in this entire area. That's a leader right there. Nothing is going to get by her. And what a gift. She's investing that seriously in a community. So get talking to her too, and to as many people as possible. And the thing is that this way of getting to know people, it turned out to be really remarkably powerful. What I discovered is that it fits with our theology as well, because we believe that God is at work in people's lives long before they may even acknowledge it or know it. Right? In the Bible, Cyrus, Darius, leaders who had no idea God was at work in them and through them, but it's written right there in black and white. And anybody here baptized in your church the infants? Yeah? Well, there you go. We're testifying to God at work in that tiny little baby's life long before they can even understand what's happening, before they know or can respond. Yeah. We're saying God's at work in you. And that's also the case when we're going out into a community to get to know our local neighbors. So, what this is what this guy, who you can find online, he's an activist and a lawyer named Brian Stevenson, and he calls it the power of getting proximate. And what he talks about is that in proximity, we can start to understand things that we cannot understand at a distance. It's when we draw close that we can understand the nuanced experiences of others. And it's only in being proximate that we can really learn and understand another person, what they've been through, what has shaped them. And so this power of getting proximate is absolutely a call for the church. The church getting proximate to the people and places in our community where we live, where we work, where there's suffering and inequality. And it's only when we stay away from each other, not truly seeing the image of God in each other, that we can mistreat each other. It's only when you can keep people far away from each other, as has happened in every culture, including this one, that you can characterize people, label them, dismiss them. But it's when you actually get to know each other that things start to change. Proximity to difficult people and places, or even just unknown people and places, will change us, and it is absolutely essential if we're going to be the hands and feet of Christ in the world. Because we follow one who got proximate to us, who came from heaven to earth to see us, to know us, and to be known. And so, as followers of Jesus Christ, we do the same, not allowing a person to be invisible, unseen, etc. So, we had a system of church that was focused more on planning. Old school ways of starting churches or even running churches, in my context, were to have the leaders sit in a room around a table, have a meeting, and make plans, and then do them. But planners rely more on experts and know the answers. But if you don't know the answer, if you don't know how God is discerning, is calling us, then we need to do more exploration instead. And so we made the transition from being planners to searchers. We relied on local knowledge to really learn about what was happening. We, as we walked around, we would not just do prayer walks, we would also, look at the built environment and what it says. We would, we were doing neighborhood exegesis. And one of the things that we realized is that face-to-face meetings, they're a powerful countercultural activity. Because what we're doing when we take time to get to know someone is we're saying that they're worth listening to. And a lot of people do not have somebody in their life who tells them that. We're also saying that time devoted to individual meetings is more important than time spent on a lot of conventional activities. Not all of them, but on many of them. And third, we're also saying that identity. You don't have to come and join us. Instead, who we are is fluid and will be shaped by even the most recent person to walk right in that door. You and you and you and all have power and dignity and worth and will shape a community. So these relational meetings, they added up to where I felt like I'd had enough for months on end, and I had been to that coffee house that you see in the picture there a tremendous amount, even though I don't drink coffee. I was drinking a lot of tea and a lot of sparkling water, and it seemed like it might be time to get a group together for a community conversation. And so I booked the coffee house, and I emailed the people I had not all of them were at a coffee house. Sometimes you meet on the playground because the kids of the person you need to talk to need a place to run around. Or sometimes you meet on, wherever. It's not all coffee house. But I booked that coffee house to have the meeting, the community meeting. Why? Because I wanted to signal that we were hoping to be part of the community, that we were becoming part of the community, that we wanted to be proximate, and we wanted to be clear that if we are starting a new church, we aren't necessarily assuming it has to be in that building that we have. So I emailed out the leaders, hey, we're going to have a community conversation on this date at this time at the coffee house. If you or anybody you know would like to come, please do, you're welcome. We'd love to talk more about what's happening in and around the Ormwood community. I did not make a fancy GIF. I did not do any design work whatsoever. I did not get on Canva, which, by the way, has that free nonprofit thing at the bottom. So if you ever want to use it for your design work, Canva, go all the way to the bottom and register as a nonprofit, and you've got free graphic design help for you and your church. But I didn't do any of that. I just went and, sent an email, and then the coffee house called to cancel, which I was annoyed by. I'd spent a lot of time and money at that coffee house, and I felt like we had developed a relationship. They even knew my order, right? I mean, we had a relationship, so I thought. I mean, they didn't have rooibos, but other than that, they were pretty good arrangement. I called them, trying not to show the fact that I was kind of miffed, and said, hey, what's up? Why are you canceling? Well, we just don't think we can fit you. And I'm like, yes, you can. But at any rate, they held fast. We moved it to the fellowship hall of the church that had closed. We set up for 40 people, hoped for 20 people, maybe expected about 12 people. And by the end of the night, the place was packed, the whole fellowship hall, and 108 people had given us an email address that did not bounce. At this house meeting, we did what church does, right? We're good. We can get people together one-to-one to talk, small groups to talk, table conversations, and large group. We know how to do it. We can start, we can stop on time. Turns out this is a skill that if you're not in the church, not everybody actually has. So number one, they were surprised at how well run this was. But number two, we created a place for them to talk. They're meeting neighbors. Like, wait, you live 2 houses down from me. How come I didn't know this? And they are meeting each other. And basically, we shaped the whole evening around 4 questions, one of which was, how would you describe your community? 2 was we put like butcher paper on the table, like as the tablecloth, and gave them markers and asked them to draw the community. Fascinating to see what people see and don't see. Number 3, we asked them about the strengths and weaknesses of this community. And then number 4, we asked them what they want it to look like in 10 years. Okay, this is when things changed. We did not present them with plans. We were wanting to get to know them. And some people didn't trust it. They expected decisions to be made unilaterally and by a few people at the top of the church hierarchy. Their experience of church was that it was more interested in itself than in the lives of ordinary people. So, we're at the large group conversation part, and one guy stands up and he's like, just level with us. What are you going to do with the building? We know you've already decided. Heads bobbed in agreement. Somebody else, this is great, really enjoyed this time, but just tell us what you've already decided. This theme came up over and over and over again. Some people, oh no, the church is actually interested. We went out, we've been talking and been getting to know each other. And the bottom line is that there was a real mixed bag in the room about whether they trusted us or not. Because in their experience, they had not had the church show much interest in their immediate neighbors. A lot of people drove in from somewhere else. A lot of people, were maybe from 5 miles away rather than immediately there. And they looked at people who said, they follow a guy who says, love your neighbor as yourself, and they weren't feeling the love, and they were very unsure. But there's another group who'd experienced something different. And as we're going out, this weird thing happened. People would pass us at the door and say, that was amazing. I didn't expect that. Or thank you. This was a really meaningful evening. And one guy, in his young 30s probably, he was a lawyer, and he looked the part. I mean, he was still wearing a suit from work and nice shoes. And he comes up and he says, okay, so I'm going to have about 25 to 30 people over to my house on Thursday evening, 7:30. We're going to talk about whether we should start this new church. Can you come? What? We didn't even ask the question. And by the way, we didn't really think it was their choice. But, were we wrong? Because this is a shift. One of the shifts that this story points up is the shift from leading collaboratively and co-creating. You could see it in the Springhouse Ministry Center story too. Didn't talk to the neighbors? They were like, no. Talk to the neighbors? They come up with the same choice, same decision, affordable housing. So the lawyer, I can't do it. Thursday night I'm booked. I'm out of town. Hey, I can't be there. Okay, don't worry about it. We'll just let you know if we have any questions. Okay. So the next day, somebody else emails and says, hey, can we use the church playground? I'm going to have about 12 to 15 families come on over, and we need the kids to play in the playground while the adults, while we talk about whether we should start this new church. And I'm like, Thursday night, 7:30. They're like, yeah, we don't know them. So can you come to ours? And I'm like, again, no, I can't. And they're like, that's okay. We'll email you if we have questions. So suddenly, we had not even said, should we start a new church? We had not even said, do you all want church? We had not even, sure, we have church in the title, but we had not even asked the community about whether they wanted a church, and if so, what it might be like. We asked them to tell us about themselves. We listened rather than spoke. They felt heard. They felt like they had a place at the table. And they felt like they had a voice, and what they said mattered, and what they thought had influence. And this was not their previous experience. Most of these people hadn't been involved in church in years. One thing that happened was I got a lot of emails, but one of which I'd like to share with you, word for word. I got it later that night. I don't know why I was checking email that night, but anyway. And this young 20-something woman, she emailed me and she wrote, I don't know what I believe anymore. I don't know where I even stand with God. I used to go to church, but I left it a long time ago. I felt like the church wanted me to wrap my life around it, rather than it wanting to wrap its life around me. She wrote, I don't know who I am spiritually, but what I do know is that I need more of what happened tonight. And if you want help starting this new church, I'm in. We had changed the balance of power, and they noticed. Come on. Okay. We behaved differently. We just showed interest in them, mostly because we had to do some discernment work. And what we discovered is that very few people in that community actually know one another. There is no sense of community, and they have very little community in their lives. A place where the loneliness epidemic that's worldwide, 1 in 5 adults before the pandemic, now they're saying 3 in 5 adults since COVID, actually self-identify as lonely. And the World Health Organization has written this down as a major, major health problem of pandemic proportions. Being lonely can have more impact on an individual's physical health than smoking 17 cigarettes in one day. So they didn't have a sense of community. They didn't know each other. There was no place, there was no means. This church building, it turns out, was, a little space that had the only patch of green in the entire community. A lot of them like to run their dogs there and let the dogs exercise. And so, okay, let's put a fence up so that works out well, and let them do that. And we had this sense that there was a need for people to be able to build meaningful community and to explore their experience of God within the neighborhood and to build meaningful relations. In the end, long story short, we decided to go ahead and start the church, and there's one of Ormwood Church's newest members. And what we realized, what we were taught by the community there, is that getting proximate, seeing people, going out, actually seeing a community. It's a spiritual practice now that's centered to our work and life together. It's not normal in U.S. culture. It's very countercultural, and I can't find anything more that Jesus did. He walked around and saw the woman at the well, the centurion, and so many more. And getting out from the walls of the church, reintegrating with the very local community, seeing what God is already doing there, discerning how and whether to be a part. I can't find the right word in English for this, but it is a spiritual practice I know we are called to. It is game-changing. It is literally meeting people gently in the name of Christ, but just seeing them as Jesus saw so many others. And so the only word I can think of that actually calls people to this series of practices that I believe with my entire heart is one of the most powerful shifts we are called to embody, is one that English-speaking cultures do not have, and that's a confession. However, you might recognize the word I could come up with, because I didn't come up with it. You all did. Maybe not you, but Sawubona. The Zulu word. Last time I was here, this old Zulu guy got a hold of me, and he came up, and he's like right in my face, and he says, you practice Sawubona. And he said it really fast, and I could not hear him well. And I was like, maybe. And he's like, you practice Sawubona. And I was like, well, what is that? Tell me. And he said, Sawubona, Sawubona, Sawubona. We see you. Not I. We, every one of us, because it's never just me. And now I'm riffing on what he said. Because when I see someone, I'm representing the church. When you see someone, you are representing your family, the church, other people in your life. You never just see independently. In fact, the great chorus of witnesses, right, is somehow beyond ways that we fully understand, involved in this. We see you as part of it. I'm part of a network. And it's more than that. It's recognizing the dignity and worth of the other person, of seeing their experiences, their passions in the lives of ordinary people. And so, I believe this deep knowing, this deep call to see and recognize the giftedness, beauty, dignity, and inherent worth of another as a child of God, even if they refuse the label, or even if they do not know that they are called beloved child. This call to Sawubona, it's a part of the shift that we are absolutely called to take on. The only other word I could find is aloha. Again, not an English word. In Hawaii, the native peoples there, sure, people say hi and they say aloha, and that's that. But what they really mean is a deep presencing, like a real sacred I see you kind of a thing. And they'll talk about this as well. But in thinking about how we do Sawubona and why we do it, other than Jesus literally said, love your neighbor as yourself. In John, the first call to the disciples, Jesus is calling disciples, John chapter 1, start with verse 35 and go forward. He calls disciples, and the first thing he says to them, come and see. Now, how we do this is a little daunting until I found this guy, Gregory Ellison. He's a professor at Emory University in Atlanta. He grew up in Atlanta, and so he grew up in the shadow of all these civil rights icons who he wanted to be like as a little boy when he grew up. Martin Luther King Jr. and so many others. And so he was just filled with great zeal to change the world. And at age 6, he's talking to his aunt, who is the primary kind of parent figure in his life. And he says, Auntie, I want to change the world. And she says, oh, little Greg, you can't change the world. But you can change the 3 feet around you. Yeah. So, Greg Ellison talks about that in terms of the 3 feet challenge. What would it look if you and I and so many other Christians got serious about the 3 feet around us? Our churches, the 3 feet around us, it's figurative, obviously, but it's limited, and if we could see, it is already changing lives. And so the move, the shift, again, I don't quite have the right language for this. I don't think it's quite this, but this is as close as I can get. The shift is from church-focused, where we really always did focus on ourselves for a while, at least in the churches I was leading and setting the tone for, as well as participating with. And we really did concern us. I mean, sure, we did mission, but it was always about how we could do mission, how we can help these folks. And but really seeing the shift from church-focused to actually engaging Sawubona. It also changes the way we do charity, by the way. There are books by Bob Lupton, like on toxic charity, that kind of a thing, because it's not charity anymore. It's relationship building, and it's reciprocal. But this shift, you could also see in there one of the other shifts that we just don't have time to tease out completely, but it's also the shift from, a few people making the decisions to collaborative leadership. And that's a huge shift that is a part of the emerging era. You will see it in businesses. There aren't, just like that person. Now they're working in teams. They've got a team responsible for this and a team responsible for that. The leading collaboratively piece, it's an expectation in the emerging era. And so, but Sawubona, I commend it to you. Time now for small group conversations. You get to go back to those cool named places, and you have questions in your packet again. It's called Afternoon Conversations. And then what we'll do is we'll come back. We will wrap up. I'll tell you one last short story and a few next steps that could be yours if you felt called to them. And then we'll be on our merry way. Okay, friends, I hope you had some really great small group conversations with your colleagues that you may or may not get to see very often. Let's do a quick review of the shifts. And help me out. Name them loud and proud, shall we? Okay, first of all, we are going to move from avoidant to grieving well. That was not very loud. You're done with grieving? Okay. So the shifts, let's go ahead and just review them so that we can keep getting them more and more firmly planted in our minds. Okay, so institutional era. We're shifting from avoidant to grieving well. From hubris to, from muscular optimism to, there we go. From demand to meaning, yes. From having a singular organizational priority to being multimodal, yeah. From church-focused to sawabona. And then the two that you can see kind of hinted there, but that we didn't really have time to go into more, but they really are from a focus on, well, the church gathered to the church scattered, but the bottom one we did see. From Lone Ranger leadership, where we either as a church or as a singular leader within the church really kind of focus on our own leadership, to making everything collaborative and co-creating with other people. That is definitely an emerging era sensibility. So I don't know how you all are going to take these forward, but I do know that there's a lot of creativity and opportunity for you to imagine how it would work well for your community. Some people might start with just building in some time to kind of grieve. Others might want to start somewhere different. I do need to tell you that Ormwood, the story ends well. We decided to start the church, and now it is 8 years old. It will probably charter soon, and they have built into their property not only a dog park, but they have set up as kind of a financial assistant, but also a social assist, the opportunity to rent as an event space part of their building for this or that or the other. So there are festivals there, and there are birthday parties there, and all sorts of other things. At the same time, they have built everything around neighborhood and finding God in the community, and are also that coffee shop I showed you. It shut down during the pandemic. It didn't quite make it. And so they are working hard to determine, and I think it's a yes, whether they can open a coffee shop in their own place, which will then help them cover that last little gap that they need financially. At the same time, it still goes with their meaning, their ministry of building community, of welcoming all, of welcoming God within the neighborhood, and of seeing God in one another. And so their story ends well. But I want to give you a couple of other resources should you want them, or should you have a colleague that you would want to pass this on to. This won't be for everyone, but I did discover recently an accelerator that was built by a group called Rooted Good. And again, we'll send you a copy of this PowerPoint so you don't need to write it all down if you don't want. But the accelerator is designed for about 5 to 7 or 8 people within your church to be central to this task. You need to pick them very carefully so that they are all very diverse in terms of the way they think, and the way, as well as other kinds of diversity. And definitely get a skeptic in there. You want the skeptic because they have great questions. But it is then a process for, 7, 12 months, somewhere in there, that looks a lot like, much to my happy surprise, a number of the practices that we've been talking about that we can do in a number of ways. Now, what they do is, that's a little garbled, sorry about that. The first month, And it's multimedia. So you watch videos, you read a reading, you do your homework kind of a thing, you come together and discuss it. Sometimes you're doing stuff with a larger congregation, sometimes you're doing research, and other times you're just doing things on your own. But the idea is that they'll introduce the process in the first month. And then the second month, you really focus on your own church. And you do congregational exegesis and really pour back into the history and find stories of meaning that made a difference and that required bravery and that involved starting something and or ministries that were really good, and just kind of hearing the stories of your own community and still revisiting your own identity. Then it moves on to neighborhood exegesis, the same kind of thing we just finished talking about with Sawubona. They do that for 2 months because they also have a mapping exercise that they would like you to spend a whole month on. And then they are gathering ideas. And here, I think, is the flaw to the accelerator. But you can decide whether this is for you or whether you want to just navigate this or whether it's just not for you. But they are assuming in this accelerator that you feel called to build something called a social enterprise, the nonprofit that values kind of the social value of what is happening there as of the prime. So social enterprise, it's like, it's like the things we've been talking about. It's like the health clinic, the not-for-profit health clinic, the not-for-profit, gymnasium, that kind of a thing, which builds on social good, is nonprofit, but nonetheless is a business model so that you can pay for it. It doesn't just rely on donations. And they have assumed that you've already decided, that you've already discerned that you want to do this. I'm sorry for that part because I don't think it's just a given. But I do think that if you're considering it, maybe you could still navigate the pressure, the implicit pressure that they give you to, okay, now let's lean in on your social enterprise. But number 5 is about gathering ideas. What's worth exploring and they say, now that you're doing a social enterprise, but we could say if. And then section 6, road test your idea. And there you're really exploring whose needs, whose call, because we don't want it just to be about us. We want it to be about a larger tapestry than that. And then 7 is getting started and making a strong plan. And so this can be found on their website. And it does have a fee that I looked at and kind of gulped. And then I realized that our denomination had negotiated for a greatly reduced fee beyond what's on the website. And you do this on your own. But I have a feeling that your denomination, if there were some interest, and if it would be helpful to some of your churches, and I understand that's an if, but if so, I have a feeling your denomination could get in touch with them as well, and also negotiate something that makes sense for the RAND, and that makes sense for people here in this church, in the UPCSA, because they're doing it because they want to see the church thrive and because they love the church. They're not doing it necessarily to make money, but they do need to kind of cover their costs. So that's a resource that I wanted to make you aware of if something that dramatic is what you're actually ready for. It could be that you just need to start with the grieving well. It could be that you can start several places. You could do, kind of a season of listening. I've watched congregations do that, both internally and externally, to get to know your immediate neighbors. These kinds of things. You have the creativity and the leadership for that part. But I want to encourage you, because the getting in there and kind of rethinking, how can we make our leadership meetings more collaborative? How can we build grieving back in? How can we take on a mindset of exploration, the humility thing, we're going to figure this out. At the same time, doing it with great hope, emotional ease, that, God is at work in this. And then moving from the co-creation, letting people actually be a part of a seat at the table and be a part of creating things. If this whole accelerator is not your idea of fun, but you are interested a little bit more in kind of the testing ideas phase of what you may go forward. On the list of resources, they're not Christian books, and I'm sorry for that. I would love to pass them on. There's a lot of great ones out there, but they're not talking about what we're talking about. And there is a book called Social Startup Success, and the first chapter is testing ideas. You can get some ideas about, and they talk a lot about co-creation and how important that is, and how important it is to have a wide range of leaders at the table as we're going forward. Nonetheless, this is my utter and complete conviction that God is at the helm. And like Abram and Sarai before us, we are being invited into a journey, into the emerging era. And we don't know precisely where it will take us, but there are a lot of great reasons to hope and to lean in and to not lose too many hours of sleep and other things. So I want to close with a story that's a little bit different than the ones we've heard. And it is about a church in Waco, Texas, that is down a road that is hidden from view of the highway. And that is where you will find Dayspring Church. They've positioned themselves against hustle culture that perpetually demands for more, do this, do that. And we as church need to do this and that. And instead, the only thing they want more of is stillness and contemplative practices. And so, what they have is every program, every Sunday service, every spiritual formation endeavor, every mission is centered around two words that serve as the congregation's decision-making guideposts and their self-definition. And the words are simple and sacred. So, if that's the decision-making apparatus, the decision-making guidepost, if you will, kind of a summary of the core mission, they obviously decided that simple and sacred, they needed to start without a pastor, because simple means you're not building it up to necessarily attract all these people out there, and so they wouldn't have the funds to support it. And so the idea is each member, one chore for the whole year. So there's like a chore chart. Everybody gets assigned something, be it, teaching or preaching or cleaning, this or that or the other. It's broken down. And they started about 30 years ago with 7 families. And the bottom line is they wanted something new, and they believed that a less busy church life could lead to healing and renewal. And so this notion, hey, a less busy church life could actually be what I need, because I want to be meaningfully involved in church, but I just don't want to have to keep showing up every time the doors are open, and the doors are open a lot. And so that's how they decided on sacred and simple. They literally had a moment in a conversation as they were doing discernment with each other about what they need truly deeply in their lives, was this kind of simplicity. It dawned on them like the dayspring from on high in Luke, and that's why they've named themselves Dayspring Church. And so everything they do has the moniker of sacred and simple, even Naomi House, which is one of the missions that they have, that they partner up with 4 other organizations, some of which are churches, to offer a house that is Naomi's house, so think Bible, where this house is not short-term, but also not long-term, so medium-term housing for refugee families who are adjusting to their new life, their new culture, their new world. And the idea is to provide a sacred and simple housing arrangement that can provide healing, rest, and in the end, renewal. And so even Naomi's house, they've done it in partnership. Once they got to know the area and the needs. In Texas, there's a lot of immigration and a lot of controversy about this. And they came together with others in the community who felt a heart for these beleaguered, exhausted people who deserved a little better for a little while. So now Dayspring Church, they have a financial model that works because they're not over-encumbered with tons of expensive programs and a pastor, though sometimes they do have one and sometimes they don't. They have a very meaningful way of being church where they are clear about how they want to be church. Everything is decided about whether it is sacred and simple. And so they have a financial model that works. They have a way to be church that works. And they're providing deep meaning for each other, because pushing back against hustled culture, especially in Texas, that's countercultural and big. And they now have 500 members. It's this shift, the kinds of shifts, and there's more of them, that we've been talking about, because it's an emerging era as well as an era that's being left behind. The tricky part for us right now is that we're in between times. And you don't just leave one era behind and step right into the next. Instead, you have to live with both for a little while. But being able to see the contrasts between the institutional age mindsets and practices that are still deeply a part of some people's lives, and the emerging eras, practices and mindsets and habits that anything else seems out of step with so many people. Being able to really see them, identify them, note them when they're there, it helps us know how to code switch back and forth while we are in the in-between times, because we do have to function with both for a little bit, even though the one is going away and the other is coming more and more fully. And yet, if we can continue to adapt right now in the ways that are called for as God brings us on this journey, I have absolutely no doubt that we have a flourishing and vibrant church future ahead. And I am really grateful to be in ministry with every one of you and with so many others. So thank you for this time. You'll have my email when the PDF of the PowerPoint goes out, because it's on the second slide. And if you want to have any conversations, feel free. It's been a pleasure. Many blessings.